Make Sense is a show that engages business thinkers and doers across a broad range of topics, all to help you become more informed and empowered. One of the largest investments we make is our home. It's a tangible space that sparks our interests. On top of that, the Bahamas is home to some of the most breathtaking real estate anywhere. Today we will tackle this and more on this episode of Make Sense. I'm happy that joining us today on the show to help break this all down for us are three bright minds in the real estate sector. Adrian Carey from Frank Carey Real Estate, Kiara Jones from Keys Bahamas Realty, and Tim Smith from Better Homes and Gardens. All are bright minds, accomplished, and continuing to make great strides in the field. We will cover this and more right after this. Welcome, folks, and happy that you're able to be there. We're going to jump right in. Andrew, with home ownership being the largest aspirational goal for many households, tell us what's the current state of the current real estate market?
I would say it's given that everybody's been experiencing COVID-19, and it has had some negative effect on the market. Overall, I would say it's still a soft market, even though there's a portion of our market that has been experiencing actually a slight uptick. The luxury market, there's actually was just a recent op-ed piece in the business section of, I think it was either The Guardian or The Tribune. And pretty much a lot of luxury market buyers, second home buyers, they are looking for places that they could hide out, duck the COVID, and pretty much, buying luxury islands, whether it's in the family islands or high-end condos in New Providence and on the family island as well. But that's just the luxury side. But as far as the average real estate market, persons we're making purchases between maybe $150,000 to $350,000. I would say there's been a slight delay or a slight downslide in that market, just due to the fact that, right now some of the banks have a freeze on lending. Doing appraisals, I've been in contact with a lot of loan officers at whether it's the Canadian banks, the Bahamian banks. They've just, put a slight freeze on lending for now. In certain instances with banks, you could get away with a 5% down payment, maybe a 10% down payment before COVID-19, but they're probably going to go in and now take a second look at that. They might want you to put 15, 20%, require you to have a little more skin in the game and use this time to try and hammer down on some more different policies where they can secure and feel more secure with lending money. Also, as far as the client is concerned, you have some persons who've been out of work or on furlough for 6 months, but bills have still been coming in. You still have to pay rent. You still have to go to the grocery store. The kids still have to go to school, even though they're working from home, still have to pay those school fees. So the funds that you may have had saved up for a down payment or for legal fees and closing costs for a pending sale or coming up, that has literally been used up. So it's been a slight downtick, but I'm optimistic about the future. I think we can look in and use this kind of time to with technology and using tourism market. Now, if I can work from home, realistically, rent can be a little bit more affordable to me if I can work from home. And also, I don't have to go into an office. A lot of commercial real estate persons, they don't necessarily have to spend so much rent or rent such a large space, because less persons are in the office, so you can rent a smaller space. So I'm optimistic about the future. We're experiencing a little bit of high tide right now, but maybe that'll be something we can look at for the future.
Great. Lots of optimistic outlook. Kiara, tell me, what's the state of real estate in Freeport? Is it much the same, or are you seeing somewhat of a different trend?
So for Freeport and Grand Bahama on the whole, the real estate market has always been basically a beast within itself. It's a highly segmented market. So you have the locals who are spending maybe they're purchasing their first time home buyers purchasing single family homes or duplexes or triplexes, and they're staying under about 350,000 or so. As Andrew mentioned, though, however, a lot of those persons are financing, so they're having a bit of pushback from the different banks and credit unions. So they're basically raised the requirements for what you need to do to be able to obtain financing. However, we've also had just as many cash purchasers, and a lot of the older locals and Bahamians, be either from Grand Bahama or from any of the other islands, as well as our foreign clients, they're purchasing cash, so they're able to get much better deals. They're able to basically tag on to deals that persons who are financing aren't able to get, because a seller's approach to it is, if I have a cash buyer that's serious and they're ready to go, I may take a little bit more of a loss than what they may have taken for someone who's financing, given that it's not so guaranteed. So that's what we're seeing a lot. A lot of those cash buyers as well are taking advantage and getting on the water and on the beach. And I agree with them. Like, why are you going to live in the Bahamas? If you can afford it, get on the water, because it's higher value, and it's also, that's what I want to wake up to. And so a lot of those persons are taking advantages of some really good deals on the waterfront condos and homes. And even investment properties has been a large market here, because similar to Nassau, the rental markets are there's much less inventory. So for persons who do have the investment properties, whether it's a fourplex, a fiveplex, they can pick and choose who they want to let in. They can say, look, I don't want anyone under 18. One of my clients, he doesn't want anyone under 25 in his building. And he's able to keep that fully rented because of the lack of inventory that's already available. So that's what we're seeing a lot of persons who are, because our market is a little different from Nassau and the other markets, we have a stronger mix of local and foreign buyers. It's just highly segmented. So for people who are looking to invest for the first time, for people who are looking to buy their first homes or get something on the water, I think Grand Bahama is it for them, because you also have the lower overhead costs. You're able to invest at a lower amount, and also your overall carrying costs are much lower as well, which is really kept Freeport going for the last 10, 15 years. So this market has been strong. We did have Dorian, we did have COVID. We're still growing from that. But for my firm, and it really depends on which agents and who's doing a lot of business. For my firm, we've held strong. Our numbers have been just as good and potentially even growing in terms of the cash transactions. So the volume has always been there. So I'm, like Andrew, I'm very optimistic in what's coming for the future.
So if I'm listening to both of you correctly, optimism, but full of costs as well, whether it's cash or you need some financing. Tim, with the cost of real estate so high, why invest?
I think, that question comes down to, what does somebody consider a high price, as well as what do they perceive as a high price. I think that, there's two different kinds of buyers. There's somebody who's buying for pleasure, and then there's somebody who's buying for investment. Somebody who's buying for pleasure, maybe the price isn't as important to them as kind of their desire and the finishes of the home, how much they like the location. Would they be willing to spend a little bit of extra to be in a place where they're very comfortable and in a home that they feel very comfortable in? When we're talking about investing, I think what's very important to a lot of buyers is ROI. So I think by ROI, I mean return on investment. So I think a lot of people who are buying for an investment, they do a lot of the numbers in terms of rental income. Usually that's what we're talking about when we're buying for an investment. What is this real estate asset generating in terms of revenue from rental income? I think that a lot of people look into that. But back to your question, it all comes down to perception as to what does somebody consider it expensive. We could range from below 500,000 to over $1 million to multi-million-dollar properties. As long as they're getting a good return on their investment, I don't think the price is so much a factor, whereas how much money they're making on their investment.
That's a good point. I mean, talking about ROI, we blend that in with the fact that we need a home for comfort, to create memories, and sometimes we want to sell. So that ROI becomes a real factor. Andrew, I'll turn it to you. What factors influence the price of real estate?
Well, pretty much it's basic economics. There's supply and demand. Obviously, that's the number one thing that affects value. As you know, if something is high in demand, price is gonna rise. But other than that, you have earning capacity. As Tim mentioned a while ago, people want to know, what is their return on investment? Does this property earn me money, or am I losing money? And obviously, if it's something that's making you money, it gives it value. You can capitalize it, like Tim said, with ROI. Another aspect that gives property value is functionality. You would be surprised how much people value something as simple as a powder room. When homes were built probably 30, 40 years ago, this is something we didn't take into consideration. We would have 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes, the master bath where your parents are, and then the bathroom for the kids. But having a powder room, something as simple as having a powder room in your front living room area, where when guests come over, or maybe a handyman comes to do some work, and you may not be comfortable with them going through your house, they could just use the powder room, and it's fine. Also, with regard to functionality, having a garage. A garage is very important to a lot of buyers. Sometimes it's a make or break in certain areas. One of those areas being Blair. I actually recall having a client, and they were looking for a house in Blair before, and they were really persistent on, listen, this house has to have a garage. And it's for 2 reasons. Most importantly, for security, some people want to just drive into their driveway and go into the garage and go into the house. Also, you want to stay dry when it's raining. And even more, to get back to Tim's point, later on, some persons who have a garage or a carport, in your later years, you may be looking at earning some income. You may not be making as much money as you were. You may be collecting national insurance. So what can you do with that garage? You can block it up, put some walls up, put a door in, put some plumbing in, and turn it into an efficiency. And here you go, back to ROI, back to earning money. So these are a number of things that give value to a home.
That's great. I mean, let's talk more about curbside appeal and how do you document that? I mean, landscaping, we often hear of, maybe you're putting in a pool in your time in years. What's an appraisal? And I know that we all, you hear about the document that's thrown around. And how does that factor in valuing that curbside appeal in the garage and even the powder room that you talked about? And how often should we get an appraisal done?
Adrian, an appraisal, realistically, it sounds dubious, but really all it is an opinion of value. An appraiser goes in, assesses your house and your land, gives an opinion of value. It typically can be a range, or it can be a hard, fast number. Factors that you take into consideration when it comes to an appraisal, obviously, as stated before, would be the land value. Then you want to take into consideration construction costs. What does it cost to build this house over again? Did I need to build it again right now, even if it's for insurance purposes or something of that sort? And most importantly, comparable sales. What has similar homes in the area or similar homes in a comparable area sold for recently? And so these are the things that go into what is needed for an appraisal. When would you need an appraisal? I would only get one when you need it, and those times are most likely and most often when purchasing property, when selling property, and that aside, obviously for assurance purposes, like I mentioned before, maybe you need it for real property tax purposes, maybe you had a death in the family, you need it for a probate, for a legal process, or for court. And so these are the only times that I would recommend getting an appraisal, because they aren't cheap, but it's definitely something that you will need.
Those are good points. Another reason I understand as well is that persons want to calculate what's called your equity. Kiara, what is homeowners equity, and how does that factor into your wealth?
So in terms of real estate, your equity is really the amount of interest that you have in the property versus the value against it. So as you're paying down your property's mortgage, you're building equity in that property. So equity is truly an asset, and that's a part of your net worth, really. So as you're building equity in a property, you'll have the leverage to be able to, some people will say, well, I'm going to pull out equity from this property and they're going to purchase something else. Maybe they buy another property. Maybe they pull out the equity of their home, and I'll take that and borrow basically against it. They get another mortgage. They'll go and purchase a rental property, and they're basically increasing their cash flow. So I think if you're serious and you're very good at basically paying down a mortgage and really like getting ahead of it as well, absolutely, I would recommend pulling out some of that equity, investing in some rental properties, and just increasing your cash flow and building that wealth, because that's really where you can really start building generational wealth as well.
Great, great. I know a lot of folks in terms of equity are worried about more or less a soft market and what that has, or how that influences the value of their property. Can you tell me, like, would that same principle apply to all areas in Grand Bahama?
No, so you have quite a few areas. Number one, again, Grand Bahama, highly segmented. You have some areas in Grand Bahama, however, they have almost never lost value. You're thinking in terms of, for anyone who's familiar with Grand Bahama, you're thinking mainly Lucaya, where you're in Bahama Reef, you're in Lucayan Beach, Fortune Bay, Fortune Village, basically all of those Southern Shore areas. Also South Bahamia, which is another popular area in Bahamia Marina, really, where you have properties that are currently selling at $900,000, $800,000, over $1 million. We just closed on a property over in Colony Bay a few months back at over $1 million. So there are some places where no matter how bad it can get, that property value holds. And you have properties where, yes, you have, technically they call it a soft market, but in reality, real estate has always been cyclical. And right now for Grand Bahama, I wouldn't even categorize this as an actual soft market right now, because you have, soft market usually means you don't have many buyers for the amount of properties. However, in Grand Bahama, you have way too many buyers, but you also have a ton of properties that are either overpriced, and that's the biggest one that we deal with all day, in terms of where you'll have an agent that may come in and say, well, this property is worth $400,000 or $500,000. But the owner who originally purchased it, he may have purchased it at $800,000. So he's saying, well, no, I want the full $800,000 back. That's not where the market is right now. So you have persons who will willingly get it at 5, 6, 7, maybe. But you have to be willing to listen to that agent. And also, these are, most of the properties, they've been owned for over 10 years. They've been rented. They've made that money back. But we always tend to have sellers who want to get the exact amount that they paid for it back out of it, even though you've been making money all of these years. So you do have tons of buyers in Grand Bahama, but you also have tons of sellers who do not want to either listen to the agents, or they just say, you know what, if it sells, it sells. If not, again, we have very low carrying costs. So persons will say, yo, sure, list it at my price. If you find a buyer, fine. If not, they are perfectly happy keeping the property. So that's where you'll see where persons will ask you, well, why has this property been on the market so long? Why aren't they dropping the price? Because they absolutely have no need to. Because again, they've been making income on it, huge amounts of equity in the property, to the point where more than likely it's already been paid off. And so to say that we have a soft market, it's not completely accurate, but I understand where people see that. But it's just that for persons who are ready to purchase now, for persons who are ready to sell now, you absolutely have the market there to sell. It's just that you need to be reasonable, and you need to be listening to the agents and listening to the appraisers and telling you this is how much your property is worth. Because if you're ready to sell, you absolutely can. My most recent deal We put it on the market on Friday. We had 3 offers over the weekend. We were under contract on Monday. And that's a lot of the deals that are happening now. They're happening very quickly because there are so many buyers right now.
Wow. Already, I mean, there's just so many information that's been shared. If I'm an outsider just wanting to get into real estate, what's the risk, Tim, of listening to somebody that has the expertise? I mean, why should I go to an expert?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that goes into a real estate deal that a lot of people don't really understand from the outside looking in. From the start, I think, it depends on if you're a cash buyer or you're financing. There's a lot that goes into the process of aligning you with a mortgage loan officer that will be able to advise you on what you're able to be pre-qualified for and what range you would fall within when you're shopping for a piece of property. 2, I think why you should reach out to an expert is somebody who's in the field every day, has a good enough knowledge and should know the data to know what's a good value at this time, what is current market value for properties. I think that is very important so that you know that you're not overpaying. Also, that the real estate agent should be able to find you a really good deal where you could probably purchase a piece of property and make the advice where you can maybe get appreciation on the property, or you could maybe get some sort of income from the property when you purchase it. Third, I think it's very important to have a real estate agent involved to liaise between the lawyers, loan officer. Getting that deal across the finish line is not an easy task, which a lot of people don't know who are first-time purchasers, how actually complex a real estate deal actually is from start to finish. So I think the real estate agent is very important in keeping that deal alive and keeping it together from the start to the finish. And lastly, I think in terms of recommendations, in terms of closing costs, knowledge around saving some sorts of funds during the real estate deal, the real estate agent will have that knowledge to kind of save you some money throughout the process in terms of maybe you get a great deal with a lawyer through his contacts, as well as with exemptions that you may be entitled to as a first-time homeowner, things like that that the real estate agent would have knowledge about that could be passed on, that knowledge could be passed along to the buyer.
Great information as well. Now, Andrew, on the investment side, a lot of folks are interested in rental income from duplexes or owning a triplex or even commercial real estate. Given COVID-19, how do you see that market performing?
The commercial market has had its challenges. I would say the residential market has fared a little better than the commercial market as far as rentals are concerned. If we look at downtown, the downtown has pretty much been closed. I know because my office is down there, so literally other than the banks, a lot of the commercial rentals downtown have been experiencing some tribulation. And also with the up and down lockdowns over the past few months, it's been difficult for persons to move around. I actually can recall a client that I had needed to move, but couldn't move on the particular date that they were supposed to. Had to wait until the coast was clear, and eventually literally just had to not worry about the lockdowns, not worry about the police, and just had to book it and go. And it was another rental deal that we had set up for her to move in, which caused that to actually have a hold on it. And where she was actually renting at the time, the owner of that property had another person coming in. So you could see the kind of snowball effect the lockdowns have had on rental property. But I feel as though, even though it's been a little troubling, like I said before, I'm really optimistic. I feel like we can be very creative. As far as commercial rentals are concerned, I think one of the things that I saw Barbados did, and I think our government followed as well, was the work away from home permit. So nowadays, we've realized through the COVID that you don't have to go into the office 5 days a week. If I can get away with working and from home and going into the office 1 week out of 3 weeks, why can't I go and live somewhere else where maybe my rent may be cheaper. For example, we talk about tourism, but our second best industry in the Bahamas is financial services. So if I'm an accountant, a CPA, or a corporate lawyer, why can't I decide that rather than having to live in Nassau and Providence, where rent or purchasing a property may be a little bit more expensive, maybe I can move to where Kiara is, move to Freeport. Eleuthera and Andros are equally as far away from New Providence. They're literally 15 minutes up and down, and you're at your destination. Eleuthera also has a international airport. Maybe you need to make a trip to the States for an emergency or whatever it may be for leisure. So if I can save money on a real estate purchase or a real estate rental, and maybe just go into New Providence one time out of the week, out of the month, save money that way, I think there's value that can be realized there. And even on a larger scale, when it comes to tourism, maybe we can, with the smaller boutique hotels, maybe not dependent on such big conglomerate hotels like Atlantis and Bahama. So these are ways I think we can be creative and increase our commercial rental market. And there's value there to be made.
Well, speaking of lockdown, Andrew and Kiara, a lot of us are home because of lockdowns. A lot of us are home because we are, working from home. But we're watching TV. We may flip the channel on HDTV and we see shows about flipping homes. Does this actually work in our market, Kiara?
Yes, it does. And a lot of you are watching a lot of the flipping home shows. We get a lot of calls about that. I quite enjoy it. I do it often. Personally and for other clients. The key advantages for flipping homes really are that you have so many options once you've actually purchased and renovated. You can either immediately sell for a higher price once you get a good enough deal on it. You can rent it out, or you can do a mixture of both. You can hold it and rent it, and once you've been holding it for long enough, you can potentially even borrow against it. And again, purchase more property, build your small little real estate empire, and that can really keep you going. I can speak from experience. My brother and I were able to purchase a studio apartment here in Freeport, and we renovated it. I was in university still, so a few years back. And we purchased, renovated for about $15,000 we spent, and immediately after renovating, we rented it out for a few months, about 5 months, and I rented to a doctor, didn't have much traffic in, back and forth, perfect tenant, because she was rarely there. And I sold it within that 5 months, and I took about $40,000 in profit on it, and I actually used the funds that I made off of that deal to start this company. So Keys Bahamas is a flipping home baby because it was perfect. It worked out well. But in terms of flipping homes, you do have a large market here for Grand Bahamians as well as locals, because more of the banks are a bit hesitant to lend for the construction loans. But if you do have someone who has a bit of savings in cash, you can be able to maybe make a deal on something that look, it's been vacant for years, it's run down. An owner may do a lease purchase option. I've handled a few of those recently where the owner says, I'll take a higher deposit, I'll hold the mortgage for about 1 to 2 years. And we were honest from the beginning, look, we're going to put some money into it, we're looking to flip, so would you be amenable to that in terms of handing it over to another purchaser? At the end, you take what's owed to you, and we would be able to take the profit, and it works out really well here. Also, in terms of the feasibility on it, you don't have to do it with just homes. You're able to do it with smaller condos. You're able to do it with places where you would think, for example, like I said, I did it with a studio. I've also done it with a fourplex. You have the range of properties here that are affordable enough, and you can get the material fairly quickly that you can very quickly make a cash flow and also make a nice amount of profit on it. So I definitely recommend them.
Speaking about recommendations and nice amount of profits, Tim, Another part of the real estate sector that's receiving tremendous visibility is the luxury market. Are the family islands that hot? Really? Are they?
Yeah, I think during these times, I always tell people that, the Bahamas market is a very unique market. You don't see a lot of huge fluctuations in price. I think the luxury market is going to be something that's going to be around for a very long time, because the Bahamas is obviously in very high demand because of our weather and our beauty and what we have to offer as a country. And everyone wants a place to vacation, as well as have a second home where, you have great weather year round. I think in terms of when we're talking about the times right now, in terms of COVID, you've been seeing a lot of this talks of people investing in the family islands, private islands. There is a lot of truth behind it. A lot of people are now starting to look towards more secluded properties, such as a private island, such as a large estate where you don't have neighbors, less condo buildings where you have to share hallways and you have to share elevators because of the virus. And it's a direct effect from it. How long is that going to last beyond, once we're able to, get a grasp on this situation that we're in? Only time will tell. But to your point, right now, there is a lot of interest and high demand for more secluded, more private properties, such as in the family islands, as well as in Nassau, where you're maybe on a state home where you don't have neighbors very close to you.
Tim, great. But you're talking about a lot of money, I'm sure, when we talk about the real estate, well, the luxury market itself. Tell me, how much money does it really require to get in that game? And would forming a local investment group be a good way to get involved if you're looking for an investment in something that's that stable?
Yeah, I mean, everyone, again, has their own perception of what is the luxury market. People, I think, in terms of real estate and in the real estate community, 500,000 and above can be considered luxury to some people, whereas others, multi-million-dollar properties is considered luxury. So it's all down to what people's perception is of luxury. In your to your question about forming real estate groups, I think, it is very attractive for people to group together and purchase a piece of real estate for investment purposes. In my experience, large luxury homes may not be the route you want to go to when you're investing as a group, in terms of getting returns on investments and splitting those returns. You may want to kind of dive into more commercial buildings where you have multiple office spaces that you can rent, as well as multifamily units that have multiple units that can generate multiple streams of income, so that you could spread those returns amongst the group. I think that when people form real estate investment groups, they're more looking towards something that's going to generate a lot of rental income. So I think that in regards to forming a real estate investment group, those are the types of real estate assets that you might want to gear towards, rather than a very large luxury home.
Great, Tim. But speaking of large as well, Kiara, I mean, there's talks of a new airport in Grand Bahama at some point in the future. There's talk about Carnival Cruise Port and the closing of, at some point, I guess, the Grand Lucayan Hotel through Royal Caribbean. How would that impact real estate values in Freeport? And to Tim's point, would that create or open up luxury opportunities in Freeport as well?
Yes, a lot of things are slated for Grand Bahama. You have, as you mentioned, a ton of major developments going on, whether it's the new airport or cruise projects, different things like that. And absolutely, any new development is good development for us. Just the announcement of a new development or an agreement being signed, no groundbreaking or anything, but once something is said, look, this is coming, and there is a commitment there, property values start to increase because the demand in that area starts to increase. I can give you an example because we helped with a lot of the carnival workers on island and everything. The day they actually signed off, well, the day they actually announced for carnival, the day they actually announced the sale of the Grand Lucayan, we had people who were calling. You have a lot of eyes on Grand Bahama, but a lot of people just kind of hold out. I guess because they're making very large purchases. One of my clients, he's ready to spend $2 million on any investment, but he says, I'm waiting for that new airport though. So you have a lot of persons who have eyes on Grand Bahama and eyes on the Bahamas in general, but they're all waiting on what's coming next and to see where different things go. So the impact on property values absolutely increases with more new developments and different things coming into the market. In terms of the luxury market, we still have a lot of luxury transactions being done. For our market, that luxury really started about $800,000 or so. And that's just for a single family home or condos, basically. And then you can go up to about, I think, probably 7-8 million different properties around there. And absolutely, that would open the luxury market a lot more because the more demand also brings more supply in terms of persons now building out new developments. And two of them currently working on are current developers who are on island. One is technically out of Nassau, really. And all eyes are on Grand Bahama because, again, we have a very low carrying cost, and the proximity to the U.S. for us makes it perfect for someone who wants to build out a development. They're really catering to someone who may just come over for the weekend, and they may invest in a condo development where there's a rental share program or different things like that, where they're coming over on their boat Friday afternoon and they're leaving Monday. That's a lot of our market. So that leads to a lot of luxury, and we have a fairly strong luxury market right now, and transactions are being done. So without a doubt, once these different projects start rolling and getting off the ground, it'll skyrocket.
Great. As we bring the show to a conclusion, I want to ask each of you, in your own words, in 10 seconds, what's the biggest mistake that you see persons that want to participate in real estate make? And tell the audience, where can they find you? I'll start with Andrew.
The biggest mistake that I would say I've seen folks make when it comes to real estate, being an appraiser, I would have to say a poor choice, or maybe not doing enough research on purchasing property in a particular area. In lieu of the last few years, we've had some very serious hurricanes come in, and also high tides, or spring tides as they call it. And these areas, especially, everybody knows the Bahamas is a very low-lying country, especially Nassau. And we experience a lot of flooding when it comes with these hurricanes. And so picking and choosing an area very carefully when purchasing property or a home, I find this to be a huge mistake. Being an appraiser, having to go into homes and see persons devastated with waterlogging in their homes and having to replace tiles and pretty much anything wood in the house is a huge devastating factor that a lot of homeowners go through. So what I would recommend doing is making sure before you purchase a home, check it out thoroughly. You want to make sure that the foundation is of a particular height above the road. If you got to measure it, measure it. Most importantly, what I do and what I tell my clients to do, after it rains, if you're in the process of purchasing a property and it rains a lot, there's a huge thunderstorm the night before or the day before that it happens, don't be afraid to get in your car, jump in the car, ride by, and take a look and see, because sometimes these things can be telling, and you won't know until it's too late. So definitely take a very close look at where you're purchasing property, because you don't want to go through that. And where can folks reach me? You can reach me obviously at our offices, Frank Carey Real Estate. We're located on East Bay Street and Armstrong Streets. And you can reach me on Facebook at Andrew Carey and also on LinkedIn. And my social media, Instagram, you can reach me at Andrew_Carey.
Kiara, to you and Tim for the last word.
So I think the biggest mistake that people make, not getting their finances in order. The people tend to underestimate the cost that goes into both buying and selling their properties in terms of, well, okay, for a seller, you're ready to sell your property. Well, how much do you still owe to the bank, or are you up to date with the different taxes or service charges? For the buyers, okay, you're ready to purchase. Have you been saving? Do you have any outstanding loans? I think that's the first place, and people always kind of look at us to ask us, well, why are you asking me if I've been pre-qualified? Because we need to know that you've actually met with the bank and they've actually qualified you to say, yes, we will lend to you. And even with cash purchasers, meet with your financial advisors. If you don't have one, get one. We can recommend one because they can really help you set yourself up for a successful transaction and be prepared for what's to come. Because like Tim said, people tend to underestimate some of the complexities that come along with purchasing different properties. And also find a good agent and trust that agent and what they have to say. I think a lot of people lose out they leave a lot of money on the table, or they overspend on properties where they go direct to a seller. Use the agent. They know what's going on in that market. They're working in that market day in, day out. You're in it for one property. They're in it for 100 properties a year, pretty much. Use an agent and get your finances in order. To find me, you can find me anywhere you find Keys Bahamas Realty. So keysbahamas.com, I'm there. You'll see Keys Bahamas. We're basically on every social media. You can find me at Kiara at keysbahamas.com, KIARA, or message or WhatsApp. Call me. I'm usually doing things like this a lot, so if I don't answer, I am sorry. I will get my assistant Christian to pick up, though. He's very nice. 727-2599.
Tim, for you, for the last word.
I think my advice, I'll break it down into sellers and buyers. For sellers, I think it's very important when listing your home that you price it correctly at the beginning. What I've noticed is that listings get a lot of the activity and right when it hits the market. So it's very important to list your property right the first time than having unrealistic list prices and having the property sit on the market for months up to a year before we get down to a realistic price. Once your property sits on the market for too long, people start to ask questions. What's wrong with the property? Why isn't it selling? So that would be my advice to sellers. For buyers, I would say be very realistic with what's in your price range. Like Kiara said, speak to a lender and see if you're financing, see what you could afford before starting to look at properties, because you'll waste a lot of time looking at properties that may be outside of your price range that you may not be able to get qualified for. In terms of with cash buyers, know realistically how much negotiation room there probably is going to be with the property, and real estate agents who have a lot of experience and knowledge typically know what's a proper and adequate offer price for a property and where a deal probably could be made at what price. To contact me, you could email me at timothy@bettermcrbahamas.com. My phone number is 242-426-7292. And I could also be reached on social media. My Instagram is Real Tim Smith, as well as my Facebook and LinkedIn is Timothy Smith.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd really like to thank our guests for joining us and making sense of real estate. So many nuggets given freely to all of you. Thanks again for joining us on RBNTV and watching Making Sense. Until the next episode, be safe and have a great one.
You're watching RBNTV. We are networking, promoting, we're scoring points for you, proclaiming. dancing.